Good evening, everybody. Let's cultivate our motivation. So when we talk about precious human life, one element in it is our own receptivity to the Dharma. So it's not just sufficient that we're born in an external environment where there's access to the Dharma, and that we're born with a human body that's healthy and senses that are functioning. But a very important element is that we are receptive to the Dharma and attracted to the Dharma. And by looking in the world, we can see that that quality isn't there in everybody. Some people don't have any spiritual interest, or they're attracted to other paths with various kinds of views. Or some people have contact with the Dharma for a while and then their interests revert back to worldly success and sense pleasure and so on. So it's very hard actually to have this internal factor of consistent interest and receptivity in the Dharma. Because the power of our habits are so strong, the pull of attachment to sense objects and reputation and status and worldly success and image and all these things, the pull for them is so strong. So while we have the contact with the Dharma, while we have the interest and receptivity, we really need to engage in the practice. Because we don't really know what kind of karma lies in the background that could ripen at any moment, taking our minds away from the Dharma or stopping the external situation in which we had access to the teachings and teacher. So we really need to take advantage now and also make strong dedication prayers to have all of these internal and external conditions for Dharma practice complete in future lives as well. And so remembering the bodhicitta, the aspiration for full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, is one way to familiarize our mind with a very important aspect of the Buddha's teachings and make our interest and receptivity in the teachings, in attaining full awakening for the benefit of all beings. To make that intention strong within us so that it will be present at the time of death and carry over into the future lives. And for that to happen, we have to familiarize ourselves with it as much as possible now. So with that kind of intention, let's listen and share the Dharma this evening. It's true, isn't it? It's true. So difficult, actually, to meet the Dharma, and then once we've met it, to have consistent contact with it, because our minds just are blown, our interests blown here and there and everywhere, and then when this life is over, we just have whatever karma we created, positive and negative, that pushes us towards different rebirths. It's scary, isn't it? Yeah, it's scary. Yeah. Of course, when you're in the middle of attachment, it doesn't seem scary at all. Death is non-existent when your mind's in the middle of attachment. Death happens to other people. Yeah, but when we really think clearly about the situation, and how dependent we are on, previous actions, how our conditioning is so strong, and how our afflicted mind, our polluted mind is so untrustworthy, isn't it? Our mind is not stable at all. Yeah? Then the thought of, some karma ripening, or our mind just getting completely, jazzed up about some fantastic something, or getting completely depressed about some other something that isn't working out the way we would like it. And then our mind goes away from the Dharma. Then we're really sunk, aren't we? Really sunk. So it's important to what does they say? Make hay while the sun is shining? Yeah.
So, if you've garnered the causes and conditions to have a precious human rebirth, and let's say halfway through that life, the causes for the Dharma to be in your life are extinguished or cease, and the rest of your life is just a worldly human life. Mm-hmm. Is it still considered to have been a precious human life, or is it that it?
Yeah. Well, when you had all the conditions, and so the question was, if you kind of have Dharma contact and practice for a while, and then your mind just goes off in another direction with other interests, do you still have a precious human life, or did you have one? When all those conditions are present, you have it. When you lose any of those conditions, you don't have a precious human life. So it's not like, once you have a precious human life, you always have it. Yeah. Because if you lose one of those conditions, then it's no longer present. And similarly, just being born, in a Buddhist family and as a human being doesn't necessarily mean you have a precious human life. Yeah, because it depends on, your own interest, all these kinds of things. Yeah. And then you see some people so interested in the Dharma at one point in their life, and then a few years later, no interest at all. They're completely, off in another realm. And to think that probably in previous lives, this was us, because it takes so many lifetimes of accumulating so much good karma to have the opportunity to really have a precious human life, even for part of your lifetime, let alone your whole lifetime. Yeah? So, during different lifetimes, maybe you practice for a little while, and then in another lifetime you practice another little while, and then, and in between, lots of maybe, born like our kitties, or worse, yeah? And then somehow again, all that good karma comes together, you have a precious human life, but, for how long? Because the times when in the previous lives, when we walked away from the Dharma, or when we were attracted to wrong views, or when we harmed other beings, which caused us to have a short life, yeah, or different things, and all that can kind of ripen in this lifetime too, and then no more opportunity to practice. So, when you really think of it, it's yeah, it emphasizes to us really that we can't take our life for granted, and we can't just say, oh, there's this life in our usual ordinary view of, there's this life and that's it. And somehow, well, the rest will just all work out. Hmm? Okay. So there was a question from last week. Somebody said, in the 4 establishments of mindfulness, where do what we in the West consider emotions fit in? Are they in feelings, in phenomena, or in some other way? They aren't feelings, because feelings are just pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Happiness, suffering, and neither. Okay? So most of the emotions, although in the West we may say happiness is an emotion, so, that happiness or unhappiness may fit in with the feeling aggregate. But, anger and jealousy and love and compassion and, vengefulness and arrogance and, all these kinds of things, they're in the category of phenomena, all the mental factors, all the other mental factors. Okay? Then in the, I was sharing with you some of Geshe-san and Rinpoche's advice about the practice. So we also asked him, how do you measure your progress in these meditations? How do you know you're getting somewhere? So he said, if regarding the mindfulness on the body, if you practice as described and then spontaneously you start to perceive your body as in the nature of dukkha, as unsatisfactory in its nature, and this kind of awareness becomes automatic, then your meditation has been effective. Or if you've been meditating as instructed and you begin to see the foulness of this body, and therefore the fact that there's nothing in it to be attached to, and so you give up interest in, being born in samsara, and you really want to be free of a polluted body, then your meditation is successful. Okay? Regarding the mindfulness of feelings, if you begin to, if you automatically, not just begin, but if you automatically recognize craving as a troublemaker, then your meditation's been successful. Because remember when we were talking about the 3 kinds of feelings, the unpleasant feeling, then we crave to be free of it, and the pleasant feeling, we crave to have more of it, and the neutral feeling, we crave not to be separated from it and to have that kind of state in one of the meditative realms, neutral feeling. So when we really see that this craving is a big troublemaker, that it is the cause, one of the principal causes of our continuously taking rebirth in samsara, then our meditation's been successful. And so similarly, when we see that all the feelings are in the nature of being unsatisfactory, that even happy feelings and pleasant feelings, that they're not completely satisfactory, that they change with conditions, that, that they're actually the diminishment of one level of suffering, and the next level of suffering is still small, and we call that happiness. So we begin to see all these feelings as really being unsatisfactory. And so again, we stop craving to have them and instead seek liberation. Okay, then our meditation's been successful. Okay, regarding the mind, when we begin to have, not when we begin, but when we have some steady recognition that the mind is not some kind of solid, concrete thing, and that therefore it's possible to attain true cessation, and we generate the wish to attain true cessation or to attain nirvana, then our practice has been successful. Okay? So seeing that the mind, is changing every moment, there's nothing there that is some kind of solid self to hang on to as an identity. Yeah? And so we get the idea that nirvana is possible, because the afflictions are not the nature of the mind, they're adventitious. Then our practice is successful. And regarding the mindfulness of phenomena, when we are able to recognize clearly what to practice and what to be abandoned, so that we're very clear, we can look at situations and what behavior is virtuous, what behavior is not. We can look at our own mind, what mental states are virtuous, what mental states aren't virtuous. Okay? Then that indicates our practice is being successful. And when we realize that the wisdom realizing emptiness, that some realization of emptiness is the way to overcome the detrimental mental factors, and we have the wish to meditate on emptiness in order to overcome those, then again, our practice has been successful. Okay? So these are good tools to really assess, how we're doing. And, yeah?
Would these come in that order, or would...
Well, usually you meditate on the four in order, so you would probably get these kinds of results in order. Yeah?
And are these so like the understanding of the mind, an intellectual kind of understanding?
Or, well, not just, merely intellectual, but some kind of feeling for it. In other words, you don't have to realize emptiness directly, but, some kind of strong feeling that, the mind is not some concrete thing that is self-existent.
Okay. More integrated than just a...
Yeah, right. Okay. And then he said, a good sign that your practice is getting somewhere is when your mindfulness is effective in dealing with the four distortions. In other words, when we begin to see things in a less distorted way, we know our practice is being effective. So when we begin to actually see impermanent things as impermanent, so when we get some awareness of even gross impermanence, like our own death, let alone sudden subtle impermanence, like the constant changing nature of things, when we begin to see that things that are unsatisfactory as unsatisfactory instead of as pleasant and enticing and enhancing. When we begin to see that things that are foul are actually foul, when we begin to see that there's no external independent creator of all of these things, when we have an understanding that none of these things have a findable essence, So in all these ways, we're overcoming the four distortions. And thus our practice is, becoming successful. Of course, these initial understandings are one thing, but then we have to keep practicing and deepening these understandings and gradually overcoming the four distortions so that the practice really becomes successful. Because if we don't continuously support whatever level of understanding we have, then and if we don't have clear realizations, then they're all going to fade away. Yeah, and the power of our afflictions is just going to increase because we have so much habituation with the afflictions. You know, we see something attractive and the mind is there. Yeah, bye-bye Dharma. Yeah. So, yeah. That's why, you know, the whole factor of repetition is so important. It's not a thing of just gaining some kind of feeling and being content with that or having some aha moment, and then after the aha moment just forgetting it and going back to the way we used to think and feel. We have to really sustain these understandings. Yeah. You can see it, you know, it's kind of like if you're going to lose weight or if you're going to stop smoking, you can't just, you know, do it for a little while. You have to really change all your habits. Otherwise, you just go back to the way you were for, you know, after a while. Okay, so that's why they call it practice. That's why practice is so important. That's why having a daily practice, daily familiarization is so important. Okay. Okay. Then another question we asked him was, how do you increase positive mental factors such as mindfulness and introspective awareness? How do you increase them? Okay. So he said, regarding mindfulness, try and be very mindful in the ordinary activities that you do each day. And so with effort, you know, repeatedly bring your focus back to what you're doing. Repeatedly remember your precepts. Repeatedly remember the 10 virtuous actions, the 10 non-virtuous pathways of actions. Remember these things, you know, repeatedly. So that's one reason why we cultivate our motivation in the morning. And then throughout the day, we try and recall that motivation again and again and again. And that's why our monastic life is structured the way it is, because so often during the day, you know, we're doing some chanting that expresses the meaning that we're trying to familiarize our mind with. So just by following the monastic schedule, your mind is getting familiarized. Yeah. Just by following that, because you know this pattern of how to familiarize your mind is incorporated in, you know, offering the food and doing the different chanting before we eat and after we eat, and the meditation sessions, and, you know, our motivations and all these things. So that just helps in the development of mindfulness. But it's not sufficient to rely on an external schedule. We have to be able in our own heart to continually bring our own mind back to it. Okay. Then regarding introspective alertness, the sampajana, he said, be really aware of what's going on. So this mental factor of introspective awareness is slightly analytical. It's an aspect of wisdom or intelligence, Sherab. Mindfulness makes your mind stay fixed on the object, okay, either the object of meditation or the precepts or the object that the activity that you're doing. And then introspective awareness comes and it watches to see if you're still on your object of meditation, if you're still focusing on the activity that you're doing, or if your mind has gone off to some other object that has arisen and interfered with your concentration. Okay, so the introspective awareness observes if you're doing something that you've already determined you don't want to do. You know, so if you've already taken precepts not to do something, you've decided you're not going to do that, then the introspective awareness, it watches and sees, well, are you doing that? You know, or are you doing what you've determined you want to do? So it's the one who kind of observes that. And then if we're doing what we've already decided we wanted to do, behaving the way we wanted to behave, then we continue on with that. And if we see that we aren't, then we renew our mindfulness on whatever that object was and bring our focus back. Okay? So Shantideva said that by constantly watching our body and our mind, introspective awareness will arise. So we do that. Shantideva has a beautiful chapter in engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds. Chapter 5 is called Guarding Introspective Awareness. So it's a good chapter to become familiar with. And it's a chapter where he also, he talks just kind of about mindfulness and introspective awareness in general, but then he also talks about specific behaviors. You know, when you're walking, you know, kind of look around and see if there's danger, then focus on where you're going and go there. You know, when you're conversing with people, be aware of what the topic of conversation is, and be aware of, you know, how you want to participate in the discussion and what you're saying, and if you're acting, you know, in the way that you wanted to. So all those kinds of things, you know. If you're engaging with other people and somebody says something you don't like, yeah, be aware of what's going on in your mind. That's when he says become like a log, okay? Which does not mean dissociate and suppress your emotions. But it just means, you know, a log has no anger. A log has no jealousy. Yeah? So similarly, why do we need to get angry and jealous and spiteful and so on? Okay. So then he mentions that the 4 establishments of mindfulness are spoken of in Shantideva's text, you know, engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds, in chapter 9. And so that's the section that we're going to start. We may even get to it tonight. And it's included in the topic of the selflessness of phenomena as an uncommon practice. And it's uncommon, meaning that it's not shared by all the Buddhist tenet systems. It's unique to the Madhyamaka viewpoint because it's talking about the emptiness of true existence. Okay. So he was also saying, like with the mindfulness of the body, there's many different meditation techniques, and it's not so important which one you use, but what is important is that we become fully aware of the condition of our body. Okay? The condition of our body, meaning its impermanence, its nature of unsatisfactory nature, its selflessness, and so on. So whichever one of those meditations that we use to really use it, yeah, and come to the correct conclusions. In other words, don't get lost in the meditation. I once talked to somebody who told me that she was doing a lot of meditation on the nature of the body as being foul, and that she found after a while, yeah, her attachment and attraction for the body was decreasing, which was good. But she was also getting really kind of down, you know, and just feeling down because of it. So I was saying, in that kind of condition, you know, we always have to be aware of where our mind is going and what we're doing. And if we're getting down, then what's happening is we're not just seeing the unsatisfactory nature of the body, but we're letting that fact, become distressful to us. Yeah, and we're, our mind is getting kind of depressed by it, and I think we get depressed because somehow we're still really hoping that we'll find some happiness in our body, So I said in that, when your mind gets like that, then you don't want to push it too much by meditating too strongly on the unsatisfactory nature of the body. You want to maintain that meditation, but you also want to complement it with a kind of meditation that's going to uplift your mind. So, for example, meditating on the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, then that uplifts your mind. It makes you happy. It makes you see, okay, the body is unsatisfactory, but wow, the Buddha understood that, and he's showing me a way how to get out of it. And the Buddha has a body that's made of light, and it's completely free from all of this, so it really is possible. If the Buddha did this, I can do it too. Yeah. So you have to, really see where your mind is going in your meditation. And even though you might be getting a result that is good, if you go too far in that direction, that you get off balance, you have to really, learn how to balance your mind and bring it back to a state where you do have enthusiasm and joyous effort for your practice. Okay? So similarly, if somebody's meditating on compassion and they go to this extreme of there's so much suffering in the world, everybody's suffering, it's just overwhelming, and I can't do anything about it. I can do one small thing for one person, but there's so much suffering, this is just too much, and then you just feel overwhelmed and depressed. Okay, then you've gone into personal distress. But your meditation on compassion you've seen the suffering of sentient beings, but you've gone to personal distress instead of remembering that suffering is also conditioned, and anything that's conditioned arises due to causes. And if the causes of suffering can be eliminated, then the suffering can stop. And so if you understand all this, then even though you may see a ton of suffering in the world, you also know that it can be eliminated. Yeah? So you also have a feeling of hope and optimism. Yeah? Because you know that the suffering isn't going to be everlasting, that it's only there because the conditions are there, and that people can overcome those conditions. Okay? So you have to balance all these meditations that you're doing and all these awarenesses that you're coming to, so that you make sure you have the proper understanding, and so that your mind always can remain in a hopeful, optimistic state. Yeah? And so this is a skill that we develop in our own practice, so that we don't go to the extreme of, there's only the first and second noble truths and not the third and fourth noble truth. Okay? And similarly, we don't want to go to the extreme of, light and love and bliss and, the universe is actually beautiful and everything is perfect as it is and, this kind of thing. That's also another extreme that isn't very balanced, is it? Okay? So we need to have the big picture and a balanced picture, and be able to see things from many different aspects, many different points of view, yeah, to understand the entirety of what's going on in a balanced way. So that's really quite important, So if you're getting giddy with, the universe is wonderful, or you're getting depressed with there's so much unbearable suffering, then, you're out of balance somewhere. Okay? Which is, we're sentient beings. We get unbalanced all the time, don't we? It's not so, It's not like we did something wrong. It's not like we're failures, you know. We're just, you know, balance is difficult to come by and it's difficult to sustain. But we keep trying, don't we? Okay. Then Gyalwa made some comments on observing thoughts. Okay, how to observe thoughts. So he said to really observe, you know, does a thought arise, stay, and disappear without changing? Yeah. So watch a thought when it comes in your mind. Does it arise without changing? Does it abide without changing? Does it disappear without changing? Yeah. Or is a thought changing moment by moment? Okay. And, you know, to ask yourself, well, from the moment that a thought is arising, is it also in the process of disintegrating? So asking yourselves these questions and then watching your own thoughts. You know? And then where do your thoughts arise from? You know, where do they exist? Before you thought something, where was that thought? And after you thought it, where did it go? And while you're thinking it, where is it? Okay? So where do the thoughts exist? Into what do they vanish? And he said when you really focus on this very clearly, you get some sense of, you know, you can't pinpoint anything down. There's some sense of vacuity in there. That things aren't, you know, you can't staple them somehow. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so those were some comments he made. And then he also was talking about from the Sao Tantrika school, the second one, on up. Then production, you know, or arising, is the new arising of what did not exist before. So something being produced or something arising is the new arising of what didn't exist before. So the sprout, the coming into existence of the sprout, is the arising of the sprout that didn't exist before. Okay. Abiding is the remaining of a type similar to what preceded it. Okay? So abiding, if something is abiding, it's like you have the first moment of the sprout and then the second moment of the sprout. The second moment of the sprout is the existence of a similar type to what preceded it. It's a sprout and it's similar to the first moment of the sprout. Okay, so that's abiding. Aging is the non-similarity in entity of a latter and a former moment. So abiding is the similarity of type, first moment of sprout, second moment of sprout. Aging is the non-similarity of the entity of the former and latter moments. In other words, the first moment of the sprout and the second moment of the sprout are not the same. They're different entities. Okay. And then disintegration is a product's not remaining a second moment after its present moment. Disintegrating is a product. Product is something that arises due to conditions. It's not remaining a second moment after its present moment. Okay. So we usually think of production, abiding, aging, and disintegration as 4 separate activities, don't we? First, something arises, then it abides, then it ages, and then it disintegrates. So we usually think of these as 4 sequential things. But when you really look at these 4, they're all happening at the same time. They're not sequential, they're simultaneous. Because what is newly produced is just what does not remain for the second moment. Okay? What is newly produced is also just what abides as a type similar to the preceding cause. And what's newly produced is also just what is a different entity from its previous moment, from the cause of it. Okay? So all products last only the instant of their production and require no further cause for their disintegration than their own production. So some people, when we think about production aging, production abiding, aging, and disintegrating as sequential, then it's kind of like, okay, there's a cause that makes something arise, then there's another cause that makes it abide, and another cause that makes it age, and another cause that makes it disintegrate. So that's operating on the theory that, just if something arises, if there's not that other cause, it's going to remain permanent the way it is. Whereas in actual fact, as just the cause that makes something arise is all that is necessary to make it abide, age, and cease. No other cause is necessary. So as soon as something is arising, it means it's under the influence of causes. And that very cause that makes it arise is also relating to why it is ceasing. Yeah?
It seems like nothing would abide ever then.
Yeah.
No abiding, why do you even have that part in there?
So it seems like there's no abiding. Yeah. Yeah. When we really analyze, you can't find any inherently existent abiding. But you can't find inherently existent arising or inherently existent aging or inherently existent disintegrating either.
Also, all of them.
All of them, all of these processes are totally dependent. Yeah? There's no kind of inherent existence in any of them. It isn't like, okay, something is arising, it started at, 9:01 and it finishes arising at 9:02, and that moment was arising. No. Okay? When you really search for the moment of arising, what can you find? You can't find anything. When you search for the moment it disintegrates, what are you going to find? So similarly, when you can't find it abiding and you can't find it aging either. Yeah? But so you can see the difference in awareness when we even do some simple analysis like this versus just our daily life view. Which was, I arose, however many years ago when we were born, and I've abided ever since. And aging, that comes later. I'm not aging now. Aging happens, if you're in your 20s, aging happens when you're in your 30s. If you're 30, then aging happens in your 40s. If you're 40, aging happens. It's like that. I'm not aging. Yeah? And disintegrating, well, death doesn't happen to me. It just happens to all these other people. I'm somehow immortal. Okay? So you see how pervasive our ignorance is, how strong our ignorance is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It seems like when you were talking about how it's kind of all simultaneous,
Mm-hmm.
to think about having the mind that could see it that way
Mm-hmm.
sounds to me like it would be so, like, overwhelmingly chaotic almost.
Okay, so the question is, it sounds like if you could really see things that way in their subtle impermanent nature, that it would be overwhelmingly chaotic. Why?
Well, it would just, because the mind is so habitually making things in these chunks.
Yeah. When we cling onto our wrong views, then the new awarenesses are quite shocking. Yeah. But when you see the fault in your old wrong view, and you really, really want to cultivate the new correct view, then when you finally do get it, it's like, oh, what a relief. Yeah, when you see subtle impermanence, it seems to me like what a relief. Oh, there's nothing here to get attached to. Phew, what a relief. Yeah, but when you're hanging on to, I want something solid that I can, put my marbles into, then subtle impermanence is, when you want something to hold on to, subtle impermanence is freaky. But when you see all the defects of, holding on to something as permanent with attachment, and you see how that just causes suffering now, and it causes us to create so much negative karma, and it causes us to be reborn again and again, and it causes all this misery and confusion. When you really see the defects of the afflictions, then you really want to develop these realizations. And when you develop the realizations, I think it must be like, oh, great, Whew. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's why they say that, we have to accumulate, we have to do so much purification and accumulate so much merit in order to gain these understandings and realizations. Yeah, because there's so much, if we start to gain them and our attachment and craving gets too scared, then ego throws up a roadblock. And we can see this happening all the time in our life, can't we? You really begin to practice, and your practice is getting somewhere, and then, some big attachment comes up, some big anger, some big jealousy, and you're off running on something else. Why? Because, ignorance is like Gaddafi. It's not going to lie down and surrender. Gaddafi says, I'm, fighting until the last moment. This is my land, my country. I'm not leaving. Ignorance is 1,000,000 times more stubborn than that. Yeah? Okay, so dislodging, getting rid of some autocratic leader is easy compared to getting rid of ignorance. Yeah.
So now I'm struggling with this phrase. I think you said that they last only the instant of their production.
Mm-hmm.
So now my mind wants to make that solid.
Yeah, right.
There's the instant of production.
Yeah. Right. He said, all products last only the instant of their production and require no further cause for their disintegration. So, yeah, then, the instant of production, they last.
You're like, that's solid.
That's solid. Here's the instant of their production.
So how do I...
Now, what are you going to point to as the instant of their production?
Oh, so just use the same.
the same analysis. What are you going to point to as the instant of their production?
I don't know, I just want something.
You want something, right? We want something.
Some instance.
Yeah. Yeah, because even an instant has a beginning and a middle and an end. Yeah. So which part is the instant? And then whichever part you suggest, you pinpoint, then it also has a beginning, middle, and end. Yeah.
Well, this may take us in the wrong direction, so if it doesn't work, that's okay. But I've also puzzled about if every phenomena has its own emptiness, that thing or that process of production where there's no moment when the table comes into existence.
Mm-hmm.
So the emptiness of the table comes into existence so there's the emptiness of the chairs and the legs and the emptiness of the top and then the emptiness of the nails and all of a sudden there's the emptiness. How does production and emptiness?
How did production?
Think about that?
Okay. Okay. So you're thinking that if each phenomena has its own emptiness, when does that emptiness come into being? So, it comes into being at the same time as that phenomena. So then when does the table come into being?
Right.
Okay? The point is you cannot point to a moment where the table came into being. The table is merely labeled. It's merely labeled. You can't find that point before which there were the causes of the table, and then after which there was the table. Right. Trying to find that one dividing line, what are you going to point to? You can't, because it's something that's changing moment by moment by moment. So things exist merely conventionally. You see, if things existed ultimately, you would be able to find a point at which it started and it ended. But things exist only conventionally, only nominally. Yeah?
Therefore, the emptiness of that is also only nominal.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emptiness isn't true existent either. And so much of what we argue about, are trying to find the exact point at which something happens. How are you going to do that? Yeah? Or the exact point, where does the U.S. end and Mexico begin? You're going to arrest any illegal immigrant. So, at what point, what point are you going to arrest them? Where's that exact moment of the border? And are you going to arrest them when their foot touches the border? But the border isn't America and the border isn't Mexico. So you can't arrest them when they touch the border. So then one molecule past the border, but then most of them is still in Mexico. Only one molecule's in the U.S. So at what point does it become legal to arrest them? Okay? Yeah. So you really see, how our conceptual mind sometimes is somewhere else. Okay, what other comments did Gyalwa make? Yeah, I think we've kind of gone through everything. He did say if your eyes are wide open when you're meditating, you're going to get distracted. If they're completely closed, your mind may get dull. So just slightly open so some light comes in. Okay, so that concludes the text that we were going through on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, which are the course 4 establishments of mindfulness. We just have a few minutes left. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
I have one more about the back where he said that it doesn't matter which of the meditations on the body that you use as long as you direct.
Mm-hmm.
Does that imply that it's good to find one of those that really works for you and stick with it, or is it an advantage in doing it? The different
Okay,
way?
so when he said it doesn't matter which of the meditations on the body if you do, does it imply finding one that works for you and stick with it? I would think so. It's the same thing. If you keep on jumping, you don't get deep in anything. At the beginning, of course, it's good to gain some familiarity with everything. You know? It doesn't mean that you just stick with the first one and always do that. Gain some familiarity and then see which one works best for you. Yeah.
When you do the meditation on the skeleton, any of those versions,
Uh-huh.
one of the parts of that is to make the skeleton really huge.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Okay, so when you do the skeleton meditation, one part of it is to make the skeleton really huge and to imagine the whole universe filled with bones. Why? If the whole universe is filled with bones, is there anything there that you're going to crave? No. If your skeleton's just teeny, there's still a whole lot of space there for stuff you could get attached to. Okay? Whereas, you know, when the whole universe is everything bones, it's like everywhere you look, you're not going to find anything worthwhile to get attached to. Yeah.
Could you just repeat the reasoning of why it is that there's nothing else needed other than the cause of something for its disintegration?
Okay, so I repeat again the reasoning why there's nothing else needed beside the cause of something for it to disintegrate. A cause means, if something is caused, it means it's dependent on other factors. It means it doesn't exist under its own power. Yeah, it can't set itself up. And that cause, too, is something that is caused. So that cause also is dependent, doesn't exist, you know, in its own power, under its own power. Yeah? So the cause itself is constantly changing. So whatever the cause produces is going to constantly change. Sometimes, it's interesting, we think of the cause produces something that's impermanent. But the cause is here, you know. The cause lasts for, the cause of the baby lasts 9 months, and then the baby comes out. So the cause is like temporarily permanent, and then, you know? Yeah? Or we say the sprout goes from the seed, but there's the seed, and you know, it looks the same moment from moment. So the seed is permanent, but then it's going to produce a sprout that changes. The seed itself is momentarily changing, producing something new in the very next moment. First moment of seed, second moment, third moment, fourth moment. At one point that you cannot find, you start calling that thing not seed, but sprout. Yeah? But it's been momentarily changing the whole way. It isn't just that it changed at the moment when you stopped calling it seed and started calling it sprout. Yeah? Okay? So it's like you don't become a senior citizen, you know, at the stroke of midnight on your birthday. especially if you were born at 11 o'clock in the morning, you know, on your 65th birthday, you know. Well, no, midnight, that's not going to make you 65. It has to be 11 o'clock. But 11 o'clock, what time zone? Yeah? And does that actually mean that at the strike of 11, now you become a senior citizen? And, you know, that now senior citizen is permanent and everything before that, you know, wasn't? Or that everything, you know, yeah. I mean, just look at these things. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So to realize that the cause is also transitory. So if the cause is changing, the result, of course, is going to change too. Yeah, no new cause is changing because no new cause is necessary because the cause itself is not lasting a second moment. Okay. Okay, so next week we will begin the verses from Shantideva. So if you have a copy of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life or Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds, there's many ways to translate it. We're going to start with verse 78. It's under the heading of Selflessness of Phenomena. So we'll start with verse 78 and go on. Okay?
In chapter 9.
Chapter 9, yeah.